Hey everybody, welcome to the weekly news recap for the 16th to the 22nd of December 2024. So, this week, as you might imagine, because of the Game Awards and all that jazz happening last week, there's not exactly a whole lot going on. But anyway, we'll get into the small amount that is happening. So, Exodus. This is this new game from some former BioWare developers, specifically some former Mass Effect developers. So this is the first bit of gameplay I think we've seen of the game. Up until now, it's just been kind of narrated space things from Matthew McConaughey for some reason. Anyway, now we're getting some gameplay looks, and it's Mass Effect. It's Mass Effect 2. It's just Mass Effect 2 again. And that's not a bad thing. Mass Effect 2 is a very good game. I think it works out for them. We're not getting too much story-wise. I think they're just kind of jumping into a new universe. There's a little bit of, to be honest, there's a little bit of Mass Effect Andromeda in here with a lot of some of the character designs, some of the environments. There's this bear guy in armor, which is pretty sick. You can really take a punch too, because they're beating the shit out of that bear, and he's fine. So. This is, I'm guessing, a boss fight of some description. Anyway, unfortunately, it doesn't look like that bear will be a party member, which is a real shame. Who knows? Stealth mechanics. There isn't really... I don't think there was really any stealth in Mass Effect, any of the Mass Effects. Or if there was, it was like very briefly. I don't remember any specific stealth segments. Anyway... as far as I'm aware, Exodus doesn't have a specific release date. I think it is just next year some stage. Doesn't even have the next year thing at some stage. It's coming out eventually. Who knows when. Anyway, that's Exodus. I didn't check any of my audio stuff, so hopefully everything's fine. Alright, seems microphone is there. Music is there. Alright, I think we're alright. Okay, anyway, moving on. Excuse me. Then there was a Sony 10th anniversary China Hero think celebrating 10 years or something like that. It's some kind of 10th year thing. Anyway, Lost Soul Aside has kind of been in development for almost all of those 10 years. Almost. It's like 8 years, I think, at this point. This was originally like a single developer put out this kind of almost like a proof of concept thing shortly after Final Fantasy 15. And he kind of showed off this, hey, what if we got the original vision of Final Fantasy 15, which was what was originally going to be Final Fantasy Versus 13, with who we would eventually learn is Noctis, and fighting all of those guys at the bottom of the skyscraper, and doing a lot of warp attacks and stuff like that, having lots of different weapons at their disposal and what have you. Obviously that didn't happen. It was Final Fantasy 15 instead. Some of those elements were brought into the game, but not entirely. So yeah, this is what originally Lost Soul Aside was meant to be envisioned as, and then it kind of developed into a bit more of a Devil May Cry thing, but it has been in development for a very long time, and I think a lot of that just has to do with the team being kind of small in general. So it started off as a solo dev, and I think they added a decent chunk of people, but it is still, in terms of AAA at least, it's still a pretty small team, so it's not exactly surprising it's taken that long, but it's kind of nuts that it was never cancelled in any of that time. I would have definitely have expected modern Sony to have cancelled it by now, but anyway, they haven't. Anyway, more of that. It may eventually come out next year. Who knows? Anything could happen. Anyway, speaking of games that are not coming out next year, Dungeons & Dragons Dark Alliance is actually being delisted instead. It's doing the reverse. It's going to not come out instead. So this was originally released some stage in 2021. It's like a 4-player co-op dungeon crawler type thing. I don't think it ever really did great. Mostly because it's missing most of the parts of Dungeons and Dragons. It's just the combat. There's considerably more to D&D than the combat, and even then, it's like real time, which is not Dungeons and Dragons. Dungeons and Dragons is quite famously a turn-based thing. Anyway, the game will be delisted beginning of February of next year. It will remain purchasable up until that date, which is a bit shit. On their side of things, they're just really trying to get the last bit of money out of it, because a significant chunk of the product will be missing after that, because it's not online. It's entirely like a 4-player online co-op thing. Anyway, it will remain playable offline and single player only, so there's no couch co-op or anything like that. Like, leaving it, unless it has taken like a significant discount, which I don't think it has. That's really shitty to leave it purchasable and not like make it very clear that the product they're selling is not the product you're getting. You're getting a single player game at that stage. Anyway, moving on. Those are some of the games you can play soon, and such as the Dragon's Dark Alliance, you have maybe a little bit of time to play it, I suppose. But what if you want to play something right now? You can play Alien Rogue Incursion. So Alien Rogue Incursion is kind of, sort of, somewhat a sequel to Alien Isolation. It is, it's set in the same universe, obviously, because it's the Alien universe, but there are, like, references and allusions to Alien Isolation. Some of the characters are kind of show up in documents and memos and stuff like that, so it's kind of a sequel, but not really. Anyway, Alien Rogue Incursion is a VR title, PSVR 2 and PC VR. I'm not sure about the Meta Quest, if it's on that or not. From the small bits of gameplay I've seen, it's pretty, but also it's pretty hard. It's not like a horde shooter. You're not fighting a lot of aliens at once, really. It's like 1 or 2 aliens at best, but they are, pretty beefy. They take a lot of shots to put down, and they move very quickly, kind of thing. So it does seem like the game is going for more of a almost a survival element to it. I'm definitely not looking forward to facehuggers in VR. That feels like a new nightmare unlocked, or old nightmare. Old nightmare has resurrected. That's what that is. All right. Anyway, it's Alien Rogue Incursion out now. Then we have On Your Tail. On Your Tail is Nintendo Switch and PC. This is a almost complete opposite to the last game. So this is a kind of detective type thing. I think you're looking for I think it's just a thief. I don't think it's even a murderer or anything like that. But it's got this kind of interesting setup. You've got the legwork end of the detective collecting clues, trying to figure out the cause and effect of different things in the environment, talking to people and collecting their alibis and stories and what have you. And then the second part of it, or the third part of it, whatever way you want to look at it, is kind of setting up these little dioramas of the scene and just, setting up your clues as to how you found them, like you're seeing there on the screen now. It's that kind of thing. It's got a really interesting setup. Excuse me. And it's colorful and nice and kind of fun. A lot of detective games are, murder and blood and horrible shit. And this one, I don't think it's that. I think it's kind of got like a bit of whimsy to it. Now, I haven't played the game, so I don't know. This could very much be a murder, death, serial killer type thing, but I don't think that's what they're going for. Anyway, that's On Your Tail, Nintendo Switch and PC. And again, another tone shift. Penny Blood, Hellbound. No, Bloodhound. It's not Bloodhound. I could have sworn it was called Bloodhound. It's called Hellbound. That's not right. Never mind. Okay, I could have sworn it was called Bloodhound, but it's not. Penny Blood Hellbound instead is a isometric roguelike thingamajig. Ordinarily, it's kind of like an also ran, but it's kind of interesting in that Penny Blood is a Kickstarter title currently, and it is from former developers of the Shadow Hearts JRPG series. So it's meant to be a spiritual successor to the Shadow Hearts thing. Whereas Hellbound is kind of a, how to put it, like an aperitif, perhaps an appetizer for things to come, to give you a kind of gist of the universe, introduce some characters, and also sort of fill the gap between when the Kickstarter started and when the game actually comes out. Because it's going to be a fairly lengthy time. I'm pretty sure Penny Blood isn't really slated to come out even next year. I think it's the year after. This was one. This was a Kickstarter that was launched with another game. So there were two developers that decided to do this sort of co-Kickstarter thing, where people who could pitch or who could pledge to one Kickstarter would also help the other Kickstarter, and there'd be this kind of symbiosis thing. So Armed Fantasia is the other game in the Kickstarter thing, and that is from former devs of sorry, just get that playing again. Former devs of Wild Arms. So that's a Wild Arms spiritual successor. They don't seem to have a In the Meantime game. At least if they do, I'm not aware of it. So I'm kind of interested to play just to kind of get an idea of the universe and the characters that are going with it. And I also saw a character there was surfing on a blood trail, so that all by itself means I kind of want to see how that works out. What was I gonna say? I was gonna say something about it now, but I don't remember. Anyway, I've backed both of them. So we'll see if either of those games come out anytime soon. Both of them look really good. From the Kickstarter updates you get from them, they look really interesting. Anyway, Hellbound, because I keep trying to say Bloodhound. It's still in my head. I don't know. It feels like a better name. It wouldn't be a better name though, because Blood is in the title twice, so that's not good. Hellbound is a better name, but still, it's stuck in my head because that's what I thought it was. Anyway, it's oh, I do remember what I want to say. Anyway, Hellbound is it's like 25 euros, something like that, $25. Another game that did have an In the Meantime, while you're waiting game, was Bloodstained. Ritual of the Night, Bloodstained Curse of the Moon was an in-betweeny game that wasn't originally part of the Kickstarter, but they added it later because Bloodstained was taking forever to come out, basically. And that ended up being really good. Curse of the Moon is actually a very good game. It's like a very old school Castlevania. And it even got a sequel and everything. Has its own parallel universe stuff going on. Same characters, but they are a little bit different, have different personality traits and stuff like that. Anyway, that's it for new releases. Unfortunately, it is now time to talk about the worst part of video games, the video game industry. So while the industry got a lot of its updates and ads and trailers and all of that out last week, it seems they left a lot of their industry bullshit for this week, because we've actually got quite a few things here, and a few I had to cut out because they're kind of rumor and speculation. We don't know yet. Anyway, Frostpunk creators cancel Project 8 and lay off staff amid concerns that narrative-driven, story-rich games don't sell. Citation needed. Where are you getting that from? This is such an old thing to trot out for. You would expect this from some of the entrenched AAA guys at EA, Activision before Microsoft bought them, Ubisoft. Maybe not Ubisoft, but certainly EA did try to say that single player games just don't sell. We're forced to do just FIFA and Battlefield and nothing else. Your single player games didn't sell because you fucking shit on BioWare and had them make a fucking service game, and then Dead Space did incredibly well, and then you killed the series, and Mirror's Edge was doing some interesting things, but you didn't give it any legs. You just cut it out immediately. What did you expect? Activision went all in on Call of Duty because money. Obviously, it was making so much money. And the single player portion of that, I think it gets good critical reception, but I don't feel like people are buying Call of Duty for its single player campaign. And EA obviously was making a shit ton of money off FIFA, so it didn't particularly care about single player stuff. It's a little concerning for 11-bit studios to trot that out, because these are the Frostpunk guys, and story, like emergent story stuff from Frostpunk is huge. It's like a huge appeal to that game. Anyway, 11-bit studios have cancelled the new console-oriented game, alleging declining player enthusiasm for narrative-driven, story-rich games. Where they're getting that from, I don't know. All of the games of the year were single-player games. You can maybe argue that Astrobot is maybe not a narrative-driven game necessarily. There is sort of a pseudo-narrative to it, I guess. You're just looking for other bots to rescue, but I guess there isn't a specific story to it. But the rest of them were very much narrative-driven games, and the games people talk about and the ones that stick around in video game culture are all single-player things. By and large, there's a couple of exceptions. Call of Duty, obviously, Fortnite recently. Even Left 4 Dead was kind of a lot of that was well known because of the director behind it that was pushing things, giving people cool moments in their gameplay to talk about. And anyway, they've also cited specific problems during development, which I suspect is the actual reason that they cancelled it. But anyway, a number of 11-bit staff are going to lose their jobs because of it. They have been given the chance to move to other projects, but it is assumed that about half the team will be let go. So Project 8 Eternally had about 37 team members as of September of this year. 11-bit Studios overall has 150 staff, so it's a pretty sizable chunk of their team who are working on this. Currently have invested about $11.8 million into the game up until now, so they're pretty much saying goodbye to that. Our vision for Project 8, which was intended to be our first title designed specifically for console gamers, was bold and exciting. However, it was conceived under very different market conditions, where narrative-driven, story-rich games held stronger appeal. So this is 2018, 2017. I find it hard to think that narrative-driven games had more appeal in 2018 than they do now. I feel like it's pretty much the exact same, if not more. Anyway, the real thing, obviously, between 2018 and 2024 is COVID. That's the real problem. During the COVID-19 pandemic, stabilizing the development team proved particularly difficult, yet progress continued. The rest of this quote from Marzel basically points out that the development has been difficult, and critical aspects of the project, several critical aspects of the game and its development process remain problematic despite multiple iterations. Basically, the game's not coming together. They're having a lot of problems, whether they're technical or managerial or human resources involved, who knows, but it's most likely that's the reason that the game was cancelled, rather than narrative-driven, story-rich games. That's an excuse for live service shit. That's an excuse that's trotted out for that kind of thing. For heavy multiplayer games, which is what Battle Royale came from, or when Call of Duty really started making money, people were pivoting to just all multiplayer arena shooter things. Then Battle Royale started making a lot of money, so they got into narrative games are dead. Everyone's going all in on Battle Royales. Destiny starts doing well. Narrative is dead, despite Destiny having a very strong narrative. But yeah, narrative is dead. It's all live service garbage instead. It's never true. It's never true, but it does lessen the amount of money that's invested in the video game industry, because they're seeing big money from live service stuff, Fortnite type things, and so on. And then that's where a lot of the investment money goes. Whereas if you have to tell an investor, oh, this is really cool story, and it's going to be really moving, and it's a cool gameplay concept, and then it's going to take 8 years to come out, and they're like, how about 2 years? And that's where you get battle royales from, right? Anyway, it's pointed out in this article that 11-bit is bringing out the Alters later in 2025. The Alters is from the outside of it, it sure looks like it's a pretty story-rich, narrative-driven thing. The Alters is you're marooned on a planet. Most of your scientific expedition, the team, are all dead or missing. You're essentially by yourself, but you have access to a cloning bank. So to fill the gaps in the research team that isn't there anymore, you decide to clone yourself. So it's trying to manage all of your different clones, and the cloning process isn't perfect, or possibly it's being affected by the planet. I'm not sure. You'd have to play the game to find out. But your clones don't come out identical to you. They are slightly different. They've come... Somehow they have different pasts and backgrounds and stories, because some of them have like a medical experience, and like you never went to medical school or anything. So like, where the fuck did that come from? So there's some weirdness going on. Like, but anyway, that's quite clearly narrative-driven, story-rich game. Why did they think that one was fine, but this one they had isn't? And it's because the game just wasn't coming together. That's it. That was the only reason. Why they didn't say that, I don't know. Anyway, moving on. Tencent directors stepped down from Epic Games' board after US Justice Department expressed concerns. So, initially I thought this was going to be like a Red Scare thing, to be honest. The US government getting in on it, going, oh, you're Chinese, so you can't be the head of a big US company. And it might still be that, but they are at least citing previously existing law. So the issue they have here is that members of Tencent's board are also sitting on Epic's board. And the issue they have here is the Clayton Act, Section 8 of the Clayton Act, which basically says directors and officers should not serve simultaneously on the boards of competing companies. And in this case, it's Epic and Riot Games. So Tencent own Riot. So a board member from Tencent sitting on the board of Epic would essentially be competing companies, and him sitting on the same board, them sitting on the same board. It seems like there's going to be a really weird conflict of interest here. So in terms of the consumer, at least, it's meant to be it's meant to avoid this kind of not insider trading, what am I trying to say, collusion, I guess. And them saying like conspiracy to keep prices down, or not releasing things at the same time as another company. You know, Epic don't put out this thing for Fortnite right now because Riot want to put out this thing for League of Legends, and they'll compete with each other. So that kind of thing, even though they're supposed to be competing with each other. Anyway, Tencent has amended its shareholder agreement with Epic to relinquish its unilateral right to appoint directors or observers. So that's gone. 2 members have stepped down. There is now spaces open on Epic's board, which I would argue should be replaced by actual developers at Epic, but that's not going to happen. Rather interestingly, though, Tencent are in talks with Ubisoft to either buy out the publisher entirely and make it a private enterprise, or take a much bigger holding of Ubisoft, but they have asked for greater influence when it comes to future board decisions, which does sound like this unilateral right to appoint directors and observers thing. So it'll be interesting to see if, the US government comes in on that. The thing is, Ubisoft isn't a US company. It's either based out of France or it's based out of French Canada. I'm not sure which, to be honest, but either way, well outside of their jurisdiction. So yeah, that's obviously going to be an issue as well. Again, there's an argument that Riot and Ubisoft don't directly compete with each other. Ubisoft, since they're shutting down X-Defiant, Cross-Defiant, or whatever, don't have a kind of live service thing going right now. You might think, we'll come to it later, that they actually do, but right now, at least, they don't seem to have one. Anyway, speaking of people taking larger shares of other companies, I don't know, Sony is now Kadokawa's largest shareholder, so this is kind of the resolution of a rumor and a story that had been going on for a while, that Sony was going to buy out Kadokawa and fully acquire it. That has not happened. They've instead done something in between, where they have just bought up enough shares to make them the largest shareholder, which is actually not much. It's only 10%, which would suggest that Kadokawa actually has a fairly diverse shareholding group, which is good. Anyway, now owns 10% of the company, becoming its largest shareholder. This deal does not constitute an acquisition. Kadokawa remains an independent entity. So this does seem like So there's two ways you could look at this. This was either always the plan, and there was never a plan to acquire the company outright. There was just a plan to just take a larger ownership of it, and then use that to kind of leverage these things like adapt Kadokawa's IP into live action films and TV, global distribution of their anime, some of their games and stuff like that. Anime was always the what it always jumped out to me that was, if any reason Sony would acquire Kadokawa, it would be for their anime arm, because it would essentially make Sony the monopoly for anime streaming. And while obviously the video game community side of things were, FromSoft, they were very scary that Sony would then own FromSoft. Any future Soulsy types games, might end up being PlayStation exclusives and so on. You've seen what's happened with Bloodborne. Anyway, on the other hand, Bloodborne 2 potentially could happen. Anyway, that's one way to look at it. The other way to look at it is the scrutiny of the acquisition may have pushed up the asking price for Kadokawa, and Sony basically said it's too expensive now. So we're just gonna take a slightly larger chunk of the company, and it does make us the largest shareholder at that point. So influence on the board and publishing decisions and stuff like that, they will be able to exercise better without having to actually buy the thing outright. So, there's argument either way, which way that went. As it stands, though, Sony not looking to buy them outright just yet. Although we have seen companies gradually increase their shareholdings in another company and then effectively becoming 100% like Nintendo. But we'll see. Moving on, Catly developer shares proper gameplay trailer following AI allegations. So this game, Catly, was shown off during why am I still hearing you? That's why. Okay, I was wondering why I was still getting audio. So you may remember Catly was shown off during the Game Awards. It was this kind of weird cat game thing that had a bunch of off-putting, almost realistic, but not quite realistic cats, and they're like, gross. So there were some allegations that the game was AI, or that the developer had a bit too much of a connection with AI companies and stuff like that. Gameplay trailer and screenshots following allegations its game trailer have been made with generative AI. Now, when I heard this initially, I was under the assumption that the problem or the allegations put to him was that studio's co-founder also co-founded 10th Planet, which is a studio reportedly working on blockchain stuff. The Steam page also includes testimonials from Web3 guys. And I believe outside of that, he formerly did work for an AI thing. At least that's what I've heard. I don't know if that's true. But I assumed that was the issue people had, that he was blockchain adjacent. And I guess the assumption is if you're going to do blockchain shit, you're probably going to do generative AI shit at the same time. I didn't think people were alleging that the trailer was made with generative AI, because there's no way that was made with generative AI. Guys, it's not that good. Generative AI is pretty shit at video. It's not going to be able to do that kind of stuff. Definitely not with those kind of camera cuts. Definitely not with that kind of level of detail and cohesion through the whole thing. Like the cat looked the same from the start to the end. That's a huge problem in video for generative AI, so there's no way the trailer was, but apparently that was also an issue that people were alleging, but I didn't get that. I didn't get that at all. Anyway, suspected links to blockchain technology, I mean, that's still there, because you will be known by the company you keep. Anyway, so he did update the Steam page, so there's no YouTube video for this yet. But this is allegedly gameplay. I'm going to skip ahead. So again, those being still images, you could still argue that there's generative AI there, but there's a lot of animations happening that are, yes, very off-putting, and it's mostly because the cats look a little too real. That's just Uncanny Valley. Like, that's not Gen AI. Gen AI can't do this kind of thing. It can't do this kind of camera panning without it looking awful. It can't do just these kind of realism stuff. It just can't do that kind of thing. Yet. Ever, I would argue. But anyway. So I guess we'll find out. The developer believes, or is on record saying, it's not a blockchain game. There are no NFTs. There's no AI used. Benefit of the doubt. The video is not generative AI to me. At least I wouldn't say it is. That's a penis. Just saw it there. Anyway, moving on. This is comedy. Balatro developer Local Thunk baffled after Peggy hands title 18 plus rating. I'm also baffled, to be honest. Anyway, so European rating agency Peggy, if you're watching the US, ESRB is the equivalent, has handed Balatro an 18 plus rating because it could teach players how to dabble in real world poker. If you've played Balatro, you'll know that, okay, sure, it starts that way, but it just does not end that way. Anyway, this is coming from Local Thunk's Twitter account. Since Peggy gave us an 18 plus rating for having evil playing cards, maybe I should add microtransactions, loot boxes, and real gambling to lower that rating to a 3 plus, like EA Sports. This is comedy. So again, pointing out that Peggy gave EA Sports FC a 3, which is for everybody, effectively. Even though that has loot boxes, which is literally gambling. But apparently, no. Anyway, he came back later to say, just to clear it up, I'm way more irked at the 3 plus for these games with actual gambling mechanics for children than I am about Balatro having an 18 plus rating. If these other games were rated properly, I'd happily accept the weirdo 18 plus. The red logo looks kinda dope. And Peggy, the 18 rating, has a red background. It does look nice, to be fair. Anyway, Peggy Ratings explainer for Balatro states that it's been given this restricted 18 plus rating because it features prominent gambling imagery. Playing cards. That's it. If your game has playing cards in it, apparently it constitutes gambling imagery. Couldn't possibly use playing cards for anything else other than gambling. No? Anyway, teaches players how to navigate a poker game. No. I mean, it teaches you the rules, I guess, of poker, but the rules very much go out the window in Balatro very quickly. As the game goes on, the player becomes increasingly familiar with which hands would earn more points. Because these are hands that exist in the real world, this knowledge and skill could be transferred to a real-life game of poker. Okay? Like, you could literally say this for anything that people gamble on. I know how football works. Can I transfer those skills to gambling? Arguably. Anyway. By contrast, Peggy is given EA Sports FC 25 3 plus rating, and the soccer sim offers players the opportunity to purchase in-game items in the form of an in-game currency, which can be used to purchase random card packs and other game items, which is de facto gambling. But apparently that one's okay. There are no microtransactions in Balatro. So, there is a concept of like this booster packs for the cards in Balatro, but all of it is used in-game currency that you earn while playing the game. Anyway, Local Thunk is so against the whole gambling thing that he has created a will that stipulates the IP may never be sold or licensed to any gambling companies or casinos. I'm going to sneeze. I'm okay. Anyway, yeah, it's dumb. It's very, very dumb that Balatro has an 18 plus rating. By contrast, the ESRB, which is the other one for essentially America, Balatro is 10 plus, which makes a hell of a lot more sense. Anyway, they even pointed out, I think, the game has a poker theme, which includes the names of hands, scoring systems, and types of playing cards, but does not include making wagers. There are gambling themes, but no interactive elements for the gambling. You can't bet on your hands and stuff like that. So, sure sounds like somebody at Peggy didn't actually play the game. Anyway, moving on. I probably should have put this with the Catley thing. Anyway, AI will crash your PC gaming frame rates in NVIDIA's new app. Cool. So, if you're a PC player and you have an NVIDIA card, you may be aware that NVIDIA has gotten rid of the GeForce Experience app, which was used to sort of tailor your games, specific games for the specific features that your graphics card had. They have removed a lot of other PC apps that they have for a lot of other cards and stuff like that, and have now kind of consolidated everything into just an NVIDIA app. Problem with that is it has a bunch of AI features that are harming your gaming frame rates. So calling this AI is a bit of a... Here's the real... Okay, this isn't the real issue. This is really more of a nitpick bugbear for me. But a lot of things that are called AI aren't AI. Like, even the generative AI thing isn't AI. They're based off large language models, which I'm sure you've heard of, LLMs, which are not AI. They are predictive text. That's it. It's the same shit you've had on your phone for years. It's just applied to pixels instead of text. That's all. That's all it is. And it's just using its training data to predict what is likely, what is the most probable next pixel beside this other pixel. You know, what's the one that's most likely to come next, pretty much. For large language models, it's what character typically comes next, what word typically comes next, and so on and so forth. It's not an AI. We obviously have the other AI issue, which is video games have been using the term for a very long time, which basically describes how NPCs behave in video games. Guard patrol patterns and you know what attacks enemies use when you do one attack and so on and so forth, that we've lumped that in as AI. Which I'd argue is a little bit closer to it, but that's still a finite state machine, you know? It's you do one thing, game does one thing. You do one thing, game does another thing, and so on. It's predictive. Not predictive. What's the word? I can't think of the word. It's a finite state machine. Anyway, I can't think of the exact word that they use to basically say that you know what's going to happen. You know, there's no thinking going on. It's not capable of thinking. A computer is not capable of thinking the way we have created them. They are logic gates. It's not a possibility. And then the third one, which is machine learning. Again, it's somewhat of a misnamed thing because the output from it is predictable. You know what you'll get. You can make the system so complex that you can't tell from looking at it what you'll get, and that might give the appearance of randomized stuff and thinking going on or what have you. But you can take the input and move it through all of the logic gates that it goes through, and you'll get the output every time. That's how it works. That's how computers work. That's how it's worked for forever. There's no change here. Anyway, what's really happening here is machine learning. If we want to get into it, it has nothing to do with the LLM stuff, the generative AI things, anything like that. This is machine learning essentially, and has actually been in the NVIDIA things for a while. They were in the GeForce Experience app. They were called NVIDIA Freestyle at the time, which if you're a PC gamer again, you may be familiar with. Anyway, what's the problem with this one? The NVIDIA app and its machine learning optimizations are potentially reducing game performance by as much as 15%. And this mightn't be an issue if it wasn't on by default, which it is. So if you're running an NVIDIA graphics card, you might want to check that this isn't on by default. There is a way to fix it, you just disable it. Anyway. NVIDIA describes this feature as game-enhancing filters, including innovative new AI-powered filters for RTX users. They're just machine learning. Basically, they're toggling on and off different features. It's like post-processing stuff for making the image a little bit sharper, or boosting kind of low light areas. Like if you walk into like a black room in a video game, this feature might lighten the area a little bit for you to be able to see a little bit better. A lot of it is post-processing stuff, but it's doing all of it before the image reaches your monitor. It's not doing it after the fact. and then like updating the frame. It's taking the frame first, doing all of its shit, and then putting the frame, rendering, rasterizing it to the monitor after the fact. If you've ever seen the RTX on, RTX off thing, it's doing that essentially. It's that kind of thing, with some extra bells and whistles on top of it. And the problem is, beforehand, with the NVIDIA GeForce experience, this was something you would have to do manually. You know, you would have to go in, find the game, and then make a profile for that game and say, I want you to do this, this, and this. Turn on these features, turn off these features, and so on. Whereas the NVIDIA apps game filters thing is on by default. And the machine learning aspect to it is basically seeing what other users are using it for. Or similar game types and this kind of thing, without having actual access to its algorithm. I don't know exactly how it's doing it, but I can guess, and my guess is telemetry from either similar game types or similar users who play similar games, and seeing what features they're turning on and turning off, and just letting that out into the model itself. Anyway, it's a suite of settings worth fiddling with to get the most out of your specific games, or at least the NVIDIA Freestyle thing was. This new machine learning version, maybe you might want to turn it off because it's fucking with your frame rate. If you're wondering why suddenly your games are running not as great, that's probably why. Anyway, last thing, I was saying that Ubisoft didn't have its own live service thing, and it kind of does, but it doesn't really want to talk about it. Rayman stars in a weird NFT game vaguely inspired by the coolest Far Cry DLC that Ubisoft just quietly plopped out. Because of course he does. So this is Captain Laserhawk, the game. So here's a new weird NFT game that's been released with close to zero fanfare by the publisher, because it absolutely does not want the greater game community to know anything about it. It wants people to accidentally stumble upon it and buy in. Anyway, so it's based off Captain Laserhawk. Captain Laserhawk itself is based off Far Cry 3 Blood Dragon. Far Cry 3 Blood Dragon, as the name might suggest, is DLC for Far Cry 3. Although it is now a standalone game. I don't know if the standalone is still called Far Cry 3 Blood Dragon, or is it just called Far Cry Blood Dragon? I don't know. Anyway, that was a really cool DLC. It was kind of like an 80s synthwave version. It's like an 80s sort of sci-fi thing, so like Terminator or Escape from New York or that kind of thing, with the synthwave kind of color patterns that you may be aware of. And it was voiced by Michael Biehn, who's probably best known for Hicks, I think, in Aliens, or John Connor's dad in Terminator. What's his name? I don't remember the character's name. Anyway, this particular piece of shit features a bunch of cryptocurrency and blockchain shit, and even requires an NFT to even play. So a lot of people have kind of, when they learned about it, or a lot of journos at least, when they learned about it, were like, well, let's play it and see how shit it really is. And they're like, oh, I need to actually buy an NFT to play it? Fuck off. So I don't really know how the game plays, basically. It's based off Captain Laserhawk. Captain Laserhawk is a Netflix series that has a bunch of like cameos from other Ubisoft characters showing up in it. Anyway, Rayman is in it as a propaganda mouthpiece, and I thought just this all by itself is kind of dumb. We have an idea that the game is just some kind of pretty basic shooter. Anyway, but Rayman's biography. Now, Rayman famously is a kind of happy-go-lucky platformer guy. It's kind of his deal. However, in his earlier life, Rayman was a resident of a universe called Dimension X. As an immigrant to this reality, Rayman was witness to the many injustices of America and struggled to overcome rejection by everyone he met. He was happy to see America fall, and even happier that Eden gave him a purpose. Eden is the evil city in the game. Anyway, he's Eden's chief propaganda officer. Rayman's friendly image is seen everywhere. Though Rayman's likeness has great influence, Rayman is simply a cog in the Eden machine. What the fuck? Why did you turn Rayman into a weird propaganda mouthpiece? Anyway, moving swiftly on. All right. Game Awards first Game Changers recipient responds to hateful and disturbing comments accusing him of fraud. So we're going to look at a couple of articles from the video game community at large. So this is a kind of "this is why we can't have nice things" story. So if you watch the Game Awards, you may be familiar with this man, Amir Satvat. He was the first recipient of the Game Changers Award, which replaced the Games for Change, I think, or the something Dreamers Award, I think, something like that. It was basically like games that do like charitable work or further charitable causes or something like that. Um, do good things essentially, and it was replaced this year. We're not entirely sure why, but anyway, it was replaced this year with the Game Changers Award. And Amir Satvat was given this award because he has been responsible for helping a bunch of laid off developers get new jobs in the games industry. It's a couple of thousand at least that he's helped. It's here in the article somewhere. Uh, 3,000 people. Nearly 3,000 people. Anyway. However, since receiving the award, he has received countless hateful messages, disturbing comments, and anti-Semitic remarks about his wife and himself. He leaves that bit out. Anyway, Satvat received the award for his work helping laid off employees across the games industry to find new work. It's pretty great work that he's doing, and it's outside of his actual job. But it does seem like his day job is the reason he's getting that kind of hate. He also wore this. I don't know if it was cool or not, to be totally honest. I want it. He had this really interesting, we'll say instead, Legend of Zelda leather jacket that I want. Like, it does look cringe, but also I want it. Anyway, he helped to place nearly 3,000 people into their jobs and has been subject to abuse online due to his current work for Tencent. I imagine this is the real reason people were being shitty to somebody who was really being helpful to the video game industry. Anyway, people have made disturbing comments about my family. I'm only not sharing those comments because they are disgusting, but I will share some other sample comments. My wife and I have been targeted with anti-Semitic slurs. Several videos mocked my comments, suggesting I sounded autistic. Great. Riffing on it for their audience's amusement. Wonderful. We have some really great people in the community. Anyway, so he works as a business development director at Tencent. He's been accused of using that position to exploit the community and essentially get laid off workers to work for Tencent for cheap, I think is the general gist of it. However, he says his community work began in November 2022. He wasn't working for Tencent. He didn't start working for them until August of 2023. Before that, he worked for Amazon. Amazon has a games studio, but doesn't fucking put anything out with it, so he's not really getting anything out of them either. I didn't and don't work on mergers and acquisitions at Tencent or when I worked at Amazon. This stems from one innocent erroneous mention of what I do in a Level Infinite article, since corrected to show I only work on investments. So he has nothing to do with mergers, acquisitions, getting studios to shut down, lay off their workers so they can buy the studio for cheap. Like, he's not part of that. He doesn't do that kind of thing. And I would imagine his name title does probably sound misleading, because you could argue that somebody in business development directing would also be involved in mergers and acquisitions, but again, I'm inclined to take his word on it. But anyway, this can happen to you too when you sacrifice over 2,000 hours of your time to help the industry. This is the reward for 2 years of service. Very nice. Anyway, he does finish the post by saying, I will return to my mission of positive public service. So he's not planning on stopping just because of the shitty response from some members of the games community. But I do think it's important to point out that there are shitty sides to the games community, and it's a sizable chunk. It's not like a very small section. Like, there's a lot of them. Don't have anything better to do. Anyway, slightly less depressing news. So Boomer Shooter Dev discovers his dogs have been barking on an unbearable loop for years. Okay, so this is from the game Hrot. And there is a dog, like a terrier looking thing, and it barks every now and then in the game. The problem is, on some OSs, it doesn't stop barking. It's just barking constantly. And the developer wasn't quite aware of just how bad it was. A lot of people have complained about some barking. There are some negative reviews about it, but I've always thought that it's just some people who don't like the dog barking. Today I found out that on some PC configurations there was a looping, unbearable barking. It's a shame that a bug survived there for almost 2 years. Levels with the ratters, the dogs, must have been awful, even downright unplayable. So, hang on, I'll see if I can get the audio for you guys. So if I mute this, and I need to mute that as well because I have audio playing in the background for myself. So where is this? So can you guys hear that? Yeah, you can. Okay. So this is what the dogs typically sound like. As you can see, they're not really barking very much. It isn't until you actually shoot, I think, is when they start barking. Or when they go to eat the rats. That's their deal. So that's what these dogs are for. Ratters. They're meant to go and kill the rats, but I think they also bark when you shoot. Anyway, that's what they're like normally. Where's the link to the really bad one? So this is a tweet somebody put out. But anyway, prepare your ears. This is awful. It's pretty bad. Right? It's pretty bad. The only way to stop them is to feed them biscuits. But the biscuits make them get sick if you give them too many. It's pretty dumb. Anyway, it's fixed. He's fixed it now. What's interesting though is that it seems to affect Linux-based systems. That's Steam Deck. Steam Deck is a Linux-based system. Now I don't know if it's all Linux-based or just particular flavors of it. Linux runs off Proton. Sorry, not Linux. The Steam Deck runs off Proton, and Proton runs off Wine, and Wine is a Linux-based distribution. Maybe not. Anyway, it's fixed now, so you can go back to it, and your dog doesn't sound like a high-pitched machine gun anymore. And finally, Christmas is saved. Zenless Zone Zero saves Gooner Christmas by fixing bug that prevented pervy camera angles. Amazing. So there was an update put out into Zenless Zone Zero, the Hoyoverse Genshin Impact guys game, that was meant to essentially make the character model invisible if the camera angle would make them clip into a prop or into a wall or something like that. For the most part, the characters are pretty small and that they can fit fairly easily in and around the environment, but some characters are quite big and chunky. And in certain camera angles, it does look like they're clipping through walls and what have you. So that was the reason for the fix, but it prevented upskirt shots. So the community got real mad. They expressed their disdain. Hordes of gooners from across the world raised their voices in unison, angry that they could no longer get close-ups of ass. Great connector among Zenless Zone Zero players of all creeds. So yeah, there was much anger at this change that they couldn't upskirt their characters anymore. Anyway, it was a bug though. The developer did not intend to prevent upskirts. okay, what the fuck is going on? And it has been reverted. There's much celebration. They've gone back to their favorite pastimes of looking up skirts and gambling. Anyway, the developer has found a nice middle ground between the Gooner's delight and the intended quality of life fix. So Christmas is saved. What the fuck are video games, guys? Anyway, is this already looping? I can't tell. Alright, I'm gonna let it keep looping anyway. Anyway, those were that was the news for the 16th to 22nd of December 2024. Again, most of the updates happened last week with the Game Awards. We did a fairly lengthy look through that last week. If you want to check that out. A couple of new updates this week. We got like the Exodus gameplay, which makes it look like exactly what we thought it was going to be, more Mass Effect. Lost Soul aside, it's been in development for almost 8 years at this stage. It might actually come out eventually. Who knows? Some interesting games getting their new releases. It's very late in the year to be releasing, which is usually an indication that they don't have much faith in the game. I guess we'll see. From what I've seen of Rogue Incursion, it's playing pretty well. And On Your Tail is an indie dev thing, which isn't usually subject to that kind of thing. I just think it's still quite late in the year to be releasing anything. But I guess they didn't want to be overshadowed by the Game Awards last week. It does make sense. Anyway, industry bullshit wise, more layoffs. Layoffs continue until morale improves, I guess. That shit with Balatro, you would think an appeal maybe might get that sorted, but having it be 18s plus is ridiculous. PEGI ratings typically only affect boxed products. And Balatro, I don't think has a boxed version yet, but I think they are aiming for one, which is why this certification process was happening. But yeah, it typically only affects boxed things. Anyway, the kind of people who are going to be buying Balatro anyway, I don't think will be dissuaded by an 18 plus thing. But it is dumb. It is dumb that it's got 18 plus and EA Sports didn't. The Nvidia thing with their game filters, just something to look out for if you have an Nvidia graphics card. Just check that your frame rates aren't taking a hit because of their game filter thing. I imagine you'll probably only see it on much like more intensive games. You know, if you're playing very simple games, you mightn't come across, you mightn't actually see any issue. It's probably only for more intense things. Anyway, and also Christmas is saved because you can now upskirt people in Zelda Zone Zero. Anyway, this will be the last news thing before Christmas, and then there'll be one last news recap before the end of the year. So a couple of videos will be going up on the channel between now and next year. I'm gonna do a couple of Foley Plays games a bit for some games that I wanted to play earlier in the year but didn't get around to. And we're gonna do a 2024 recap thing where we kind of rate and rank some of the games that we played this year on the channel, and some games that I played off stream as well, because I'd like to talk about them. And then either before the end of the year or very early next year, we will do what's coming out in 2025 thing. Last year we did like 90 games, and that was quite long. So I'm either gonna do I'm probably not gonna do a stream. I will probably do a pre-recorded thing because I can do some editing and make it not a crazy long video like it was last time. But yeah, it's still gonna be a sizable number of games. Anyway, that's the plan for the next week or 2 weeks or so. Anyway, that's it for me for today, though. Thanks for keeping me company, and we'll talk to you guys at some point. Have a good one.